What dark impulse led to such violence that night?
One of them saw them in bed together.
When the police officer got there to question her, she was surrounded by candles and photographs.
They realized there was something very different going on.
It's unfortunate, it's terrible that it happened here, and I think it's happened before and it'll happen again.
October 2nd, 1999, Westlake Hills, Texas. It's early Saturday morning in this suburban community of 3,000, just minutes away from Austin.
It's a very upscale, very low crime area. Unusual to have really very many calls for service at all in that area.
But several hours before dawn, Deputy Greg Truitt's radio crackles to life.
It was like 2:30, 3 in the morning. I was driving just outside the city of Westlake in the Travis County area, and a call came out. A man called 911 saying that
He said to the operator he didn't know had exploded and his guts were spilling out.
They get the ambulance crews en route. I was very close. Another deputy and I arrived at the residence at the same time.
It's a very nice house. It was an architect-designed house. It was a split level, very nice place on a large tract of land, almost on a hilltop, very secluded.
We'd knock on the door, no answer. So we began just doing a perimeter check of the house, and sure enough, the first windows and door we come to were the bedroom where the caller was in bed, still on his phone when we got there. I think he was still talking to the dispatchers. And he's clenching his hands over his stomach, which was very large. That's when a lady appeared from the other portion of the house in night clothes.
The man in distress is an Austin media mogul and millionaire named Stephen Beard. The woman, Stephen's wife Celeste, is soon joined by her teenage daughter Christina.
They were asleep on the other side of the house, which is a rather large home.
They heard the sirens and saw the flashing lights. And that's when they learned that something had happened to Stephen.
She just immediately started screaming, "Don't let him die, don't let him die." I mean, just pleading with us to handle the problem, whatever it was.
75-year-old Stephen Beard didn't start life as a millionaire.
Steve grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and not a wealthy family, and he was trained and taught and believed in hard work. Eventually, he worked his way up into advertising, and then eventually he decided that he wanted to start a TV station.
He was a self-made man. He started a television station from scratch in Austin and built it up to be one of the major television stations in Austin, and sold it at a tremendous profit.
After Steve sold the TV station, he became a multi-millionaire. I think the TV station sold for about $54 million. He got about a third of that. But then he also had some nice real estate.
But despite his millions, by 1993, Stephen had experienced his share of hardship.
His wife, the mother of his children, died of cancer.
After her death, he was heartbroken, but his kids loved him and surrounded him. His friends loved him and surrounded him.
One of those friends was 32-year-old Celeste Martinez, who Stephen met during his wife's long illness.
He would go to the Austin Country Club, where he was a member, and have dinner, and that was his time to see people. Celeste was a waitress then at the Austin Country Club, and that's how they originally met. And they quickly went from talking to dating in a very short time.
He was, by every description of his friends, funny and fun. Celeste is a very attractive woman, blonde, bubbly, funny, And I think they just hit it off very well.
They did not date for very long before they were married at the same country club where Stephen Beard had met then Celeste Martinez.
The whirlwind romance caught friends and family by surprise, but the couple didn't care.
There was a major age difference between them, but they were in love. He loved her, she loved him.
He was about 70 years old, and she was in her early 30s. He was very drawn to this person who made him happy and made him feel good.
He was a person who had a big personality, enjoyed life, enjoyed being with his friends and family.
Stephen felt so strongly about family that he formally adopted Celeste's teenage twin daughters, Christina and Jennifer.
This was just something that Stephen wanted to do and wanted to make it clear to them that they were part of his family.
They called him Big Daddy. That was what his co-workers and friends called him, was Big Daddy.
To house his new family, Big Daddy built a magnificent new mansion in Westlake Hills.
It was opulent, and the stone walls, it just felt so safe and secure, just like a fairy book setting.
And Celeste Beard was the Cinderella at the center of it all.
Stephen doted on Celeste, and Stephen loved being able to make her happy.
But now, Celeste's happily ever after has turned into a nightmare.
Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to ambulances and police and finding that your husband, something terrible had happened to him. She was hysterical.
This man must have meant the world to her because the tone of her voice and everything was just so serious and scared, truly scared.
And the situation was about to get even more frightening.
As the medical crew were switching him from the bed to the stretchers for transport, they discovered a shotgun shell in the bedding.
At that point, things changed drastically.
180 degrees from a medical emergency to a violent crime scene.
Coming up, is there more bloodshed to come?
For all we knew, there could be bad guys in this house still.
Police responding to a 911 call from millionaire media mogul Stephen Beard have just found a spent shotgun shell in the injured man's bed.
It came out originally as a medical call. Then they realized that something else was going on, that instead he had actually been shot.
He's alert and conscious and talking to us, and so that's why I just kept going back in my head that, you know, he must have had a surgery and they had split open or something like that. I could see medical equipment beside his bed. He might have had a breathing tube providing oxygen or something. So it just reinforced to me that he was under medical duress.
It did seem so strange that he would call 911 and not have an accurate comprehension of what had occurred to him. He was probably asleep. And it was the pain that woke him up as opposed to the sound of the gun or anything.
Beard's wife Celeste and her daughter Christina appeared just as baffled as the police.
Miss Beard didn't sleep in the same bedroom as her husband.
The home had a wing with a separate bedroom for Celeste, where she slept often, because Stephen had, among other medical problems, COPD, a breathing difficulty, and he slept with a breathing machine. So the first thing that they knew was there were sirens and red lights flashing.
While EMTs rush Stephen to the hospital, police go through the mansion room by room.
For all we knew, there could be bad guys or whatever in this house still. And now we have to do a orchestrated point-by-point search of the house. And at the same time we're checking for bad guys, we're looking for evidence.
Deputies don't find any intruders or signs of forced entry.
It appeared that the door was unlocked, which was somewhat unusual, although people leave their doors unlocked far more often than law enforcement wishes they would.
Jewelry boxes on the vanities did not appear to be pilfered. There was lots of jewelry present. There was closets full of high-end clothing. There was artwork, statues, obvious artifacts and trinkets that would be valuable left undisturbed.
Robbery's not the motive, or burglary's not the motive. They began to think that it was someone who had come there for the sole purpose of shooting Stephen Beard. So if he was the target, then why would it be that someone would target this man?
While CSI processes the house, investigators begin to question witnesses and the victim.
The detectives that respond to the scene, several, go to the hospital and interview Stephen Beard. We had probably 2 at the house interviewing people.
However, none of the witnesses, including Stephen, offer any possible leads.
He couldn't understand why he would be shot. It wasn't like he, upon realizing that it actually was a gunshot wound, that, he immediately gave us a list of people to look at.
There wasn't any talk of having enemies or anyone having idea who would do something like this or why they would do that. He was a respected man in the community, a successful guy, so everything was a mystery.
He didn't appear to be someone who would have anyone who would have some sort of vengeance against him, some reason to harm him. So then you start, looking to see what could this possibly be.
Investigators also questioned Celeste's daughter, Jennifer, who'd been staying with friends the night of the shooting.
The other daughter came in, that morning. As soon as she was notified, she returned to the house.
She was upset and, concerned about whether or not he would survive.
Jennifer's too distraught to give investigators much information. But as word of the shooting spreads and friends and family gather to support Celeste and her daughters, the shooting investigation takes a sudden turn.
One of the friends approached us, and they gave us a name and suggested that it might be something that deserved to be looked into.
They thought that they had a suspect and that it was a young woman who had had contact with Celeste Beard in the past.
The woman's name is Tracy Tarleton. And when investigators follow up with Celeste's daughters, they confirm that there was no love lost between Tracy and their adopted dad.
Stephen did not approve of Tracy Tarleton, and Stephen was pretty perceptive about what he thought Tracy Tarleton was after, and that is Tracy Tarleton was after Celeste.
Coming up, did a love triangle become a ticking time bomb?
What we found was that she had, and this is her word, recruited married women who were not happy to be her lovers.
While doctors fight to save millionaire Stephen Beard, gravely injured by a shotgun blast while he slept in his mansion outside Austin, Texas, investigators have just uncovered a possible lead on the shooter's identity.
Someone at the scene that morning voiced a concern about a specific person and provided us what probably was our first lead.
Acting on the tip, detectives take a closer look at a 59-year-old Austin woman named Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy was a manager of Book People. It's a large, very popular bookstore in downtown Austin.
Tracy met Stephen Beard's wife Celeste at a local psychiatric facility several months before the shooting.
Celeste suffered from depression, And she did check into a psychiatric hospital a couple of times, dealing with her problems, and she met Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy, at the time, had a pretty significant problem with alcohol, and it got to the point where she was feeling suicidal.
Tracy had some legitimate issues that she was trying to deal with.
Her mental health would go, and then she'd start self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And when that would happen, her bipolar disorder would kick into gear.
During their brief time together, the two women became friends.
Celeste felt sorry for Tracy. Tracy's not very attractive physically. Celeste felt sorry for her.
Tracy is funny, and Tracy is bright. I think they had similar sense of humors, that they could get along.
After they were both out of the hospital, they did continue a friendship.
Because of the communications they were having, long phone calls, Stephen Beard realized that Celeste Beard was involved in some kind of what seemed to be a very serious friendship to him at the time with Tracy Tarleton. But he at that point had never met Tracy Tarleton.
That changed in August of 1999, a little more than a month before the shooting.
Stephen Beard decides he wants to meet this person who seems to be such an integral part of his wife's life. And then Celeste Beard invites Tracy over. Stephen Beard is friendly toward Tracy, welcomes her into his home, cooks dinner for them.
But after dinner, while Tracy and Celeste are sitting outside, things took an unexpected turn.
Tracy was drunk and trying to kiss Celeste.
Christina sees them kiss, and then she goes to tell Steve what she witnessed. Stephen Beard confronts Tracy and tells her she needs to leave. He's not violent about it. He doesn't throw her out of the house. He tells her she needs to leave, and she does leave.
She had stormed out of the house, and she was arrested that night by the Austin police. The charge was driving while intoxicated.
Now investigators wonder, had Celeste's would-be lover sought her revenge?
Tracy is having these mental issues, a very fragile person emotionally, and she meets Celeste Beard, and she falls in love with Celeste Beard.
Tracy firmly believed the thing standing between her everlasting happiness with Celeste was Stephen Beard.
When confronted by police, Tracy doesn't deny shooting Stephen.
When the investigating officers went to Tracy Tarleton's home in South Austin, she was surrounded by candles and photographs of Celeste, obsessed with Celeste. She turned over the shotgun to him. I suppose she knew that the jig was up, that she was caught.
Investigators take Tracy into custody and then inform Celeste that her friend has been arrested.
It was devastating for her. Celeste didn't want to believe that Tracy had been the one that had done this because she tried to be a friend to Tracy, and she was in denial for a long time until they tested ballistics. You can actually test ballistics of a shotgun shell. Were able to tell that the shotgun shell that was found on the floor of Stephen's bedroom was fired by the gun that Tracy Tarleton had.
While the prosecutors build their case against Tracy, Stephen struggles to overcome his devastating injuries.
He was in the hospital a couple months.
Celeste visited him as much as she could on a daily basis. She had, in anticipation of him being released from the hospital, wheelchair ramps made, looking forward to getting him home again where she could take care of him.
But Stephen never fully recovers from his wound and dies in the hospital on January 22nd, 2000.
The medical examiner said it was caused by a pulmonary embolism related to him being shot. Therefore, the cause of death is the gunshot.
Before Stephen's death, she was charged with aggravated assault, and injury to an elderly individual. After Stephen's death, Tracy was charged with capital murder.
Coming up, a young widow goes to any lengths to get a fresh start on love.
We found that Stephen was her fourth marriage.
Then you began to wonder if there was perhaps a more sinister connection.
At the end of February, Tracy Tarleton is in the Travis County, Texas jail, charged with murdering Austin millionaire Stephen Beard.
It wasn't a whodunit. We know who pulled the trigger. It was Tracy Tarleton.
She didn't get rid of the shotgun. I'm not sure that she actually realized that she had left evidence at the scene. So the case against her was strong.
Was Stephen Beard simply the victim of Tracy's obsession with his wife, Celeste? Or was there a piece missing?
Our minds kept coming back to this fact of it was easy for her to get in there and that none of the alarms were set in that area of the house and the door was unlocked.
I think there was suspicion from the very first night that Celeste was involved.
She may have played a role in this plan.
Although questioned repeatedly by investigators, Tracy adamantly denies that Celeste had anything to do with Stephen's death.
Even after she acknowledged that she had been in fact the one who shot Stephen Beard, she still didn't reveal any sort of encouragement that she had received, or certainly any sort of coordination with Celeste Beard.
Over the weeks that follow, friends of Stephen and Celeste started reaching out to the investigators, and their stories paint a very different picture of what investigators believed was a happy marriage.
According to the people who were hanging around with her, she was going through a lot of men, entertaining a lot of sexual partners. She was living an extremely extravagant, lavish, single lifestyle.
After Stephen died, Celeste just kind of went crazy. She went on a spree of drinking and partying and going out and making a mess of her life.
You know, going on a trip to New Orleans and other places, taking girlfriends along, hanging out at 6th Street, going to all the bars, just celebrating life.
According to friends, she's also burning through Stephen's millions at an alarming rate.
From the funeral on, Celeste Beard seems intent on squandering the rest of Stephen Beard's estate. It's just a girl gone wild is what it seemed like after Stephen Beard's death.
Based on her unusual behavior following her husband's death, investigators began digging into Celeste's past.
We found that Stephen was her fourth marriage. She had had marriages along the West Coast before she moved to Austin with her third husband.
Celeste and her third husband divorced shortly before she married Stephen, but according to friends, they continued to sleep together after the divorce.
Celeste would have affairs with her ex-husband, but she said she never thought of as an affair because she had already been married to him, so it didn't count as an affair.
In addition to the infidelity, investigators also learned that Celeste has a criminal record.
She had been charged with a fraud crime in Arizona, for which she was on probation for, unknown to Stephen Beard at the time they had been married.
Then you began to wonder whether or not there was perhaps a more sinister connection between Tracy and Celeste Beard.
There was no way that we were going to be able to prove a case against Celeste without Tracy's testimony. So Tracy's lawyers, from the beginning, were hinting around to the prosecutors that Tracy had a story to tell, and they wanted immunity for her testimony. But the DA's office was not willing to give her complete immunity and no punishment.
Once again, Tracy refuses to implicate Celeste.
She was hesitant to make any sort of connection as far as motivation to Celeste.
But would Tracy change her tune after Celeste met a new man?
She met Cole Johnson at a bar where he was bartending on 6th Street. For Celeste Beard, that's kind of par for the course.
He kind of straightened her up, saw that she was being very self-destructive, and convinced her to pull back.
Then, in July of 2000, just a few months after meeting, and barely 6 months after Stephen's death, Celeste and Cole become man and wife.
There's no question, given her history, that she's going to be married again soon. But, ultimately, that was her downfall. And it was clear from that marriage to Cole Johnson, Tracy Tarleton decided that she should come forward and tell the truth.
Tracy realized that she'd been used and became willing to tell the rest of the story.
Coming up, the wages of a marriage gone haywire.
Celeste despised the fact that she had to have a sexual relationship with him.
Awaiting trial for the murder of Austin media mogul Stephen Beard, 42-year-old Tracy Tarleton has refused to implicate Beard's wife Celeste in the Millionaires' murder.
She's going to take responsibility for this murder. She's not going to name Celeste Beard as being involved in it. She's just going to take the full rap, but then she's betrayed by Celeste Beard.
A few months after Stephen's death, Celeste meets a bartender named Cole Johnson, and he becomes her fifth husband.
And what Tracy Tarleton provided was the details of the planning and the actual details of Celeste Beard encouraging, aiding, and assisting her in causing the death of Stephen Beard. She gave all the details.
Tracy tells detectives that at first, money hadn't been an issue for Celeste.
In order to make sure that she had access to her own money, he set up a trust fund for her, and he put in $500,000, $500,000 in this trust fund. She just blew through it. It was 6 months that she went through that $500,000. It's not clear exactly where all the money was going. A lot of it was in high-end fashion, stuff that she never ever wore, handbags and dresses and jewelry.
Celeste bragged one day that somebody asked her, "What's the most you've ever spent in one day?" And she said $50,000.
Stephen Beard approaches her and says, "You are squandering this entire estate. You are destroying everything I've spent my life building. I can't be with you anymore." He begins divorce proceedings. Her response to that is like she's going to kill herself. And then she's taken to the psychiatric unit of a local hospital for treatment. And it meets this woman by the name of Tracy Tarleton.
I think Celeste manipulated everyone in her life, including her husband and her children, and then later Tracy Tarleton. And she was able to manipulate Tracy because Tracy was particularly vulnerable.
They right away started some kind of close friendship. I think early on they were very huggy and even kissed.
According to Tracy, Celeste also made it clear that she was unhappy with Stephen.
She despised the fact that she had to have a sexual relationship with him every once in a while.
There was evidence that Celeste had been drugging Stephen, that she would crush up sleeping pills and put them in his food, and that she would substitute Everclear for vodka in his drinks, just have him pass out so that I don't have to deal with him.
And then Celeste would go out and party all night long. And the next day she would be difficult to wake up because she'd been up all night.
Tracy tells police that once they were both out of the psychiatric hospital, Celeste continued to drug her husband and sneak out to spend time with her new friend.
Celeste Beard went out of her way to have contact with Tracy Tarleton and increase this relationship to the point that it became a sexual relationship.
From the prosecution standpoint, yes, it seemed like she was using sex and love to get what she wanted from Tracy. And to Tracy, the love was the important thing.
According to Tracy, Celeste made what she wanted abundantly clear.
It had been kind of planted in her mind that Celeste was being, treated horribly by Stephen Beard, that if he were to be gotten rid of, that she and Celeste could be together.
Tracy's motive was simply love. She loved Celeste Beard. She's never been anything other than totally honest with this.
And Celeste had everything to gain from her husband's death.
He was probably going to divorce her. They had a prenuptial agreement, and any money that she was entitled to related to those agreements, she had already spent.
But if they were still married at the time of his death, she was going to be in a position to inherit his wealth. What Celeste stood to gain was mostly the money.
Tracy says that once she agreed to kill Stephen, Celeste had promised to clear her path.
The alarm system would be off, and the door would be open. She could get in and get out undetected.
She came into the bedroom, shot him in the stomach, and then left.
But she'd failed to kill Stephen outright and left a vital piece of evidence behind.
It was a very poorly planned shooting. She used a 20-gauge shotgun with birdshot. The only shell that was fired ejected, and it was left there.
Tracy Tarleton pulled the trigger. The evidence clearly shows that. But the only reason Tracy Tarleton pulled the trigger in this case was because of Celeste Beard.
Once Tracy flipped and agreed to testify against Celeste, then the prosecution got an indictment against Celeste and had her arrested.
She was charged with capital murder. The automatic punishment if you're found guilty is life in prison.
Coming up, a dramatic trial becomes a loving parent's worst nightmare.
Just for Celeste to sit in the courtroom, it destroyed her.
When Celeste Beard goes on trial for murder in March of 2003, the salacious details have all of Austin, Texas buzzing.
You had a person who hoped to be a rich heiress with this lesbian lover who ultimately murders her rich older husband by shotgun. So all those things added up to what was basically, for many people, a soap opera that they couldn't stop following.
This perhaps mentally imbalanced woman killing out of lesbian love, and it sounded like some kind of made-for-TV movie.
The prosecution lays out their case first.
The evidence will show that what happened here is a simple case of a greedy, manipulative defendant who took advantage of a mentally ill woman who was in love with her.
Tracy would be showing up at the trial to say she pulled the trigger. So the question of the trial was, why would Tracy Tarleton kill Stephen Beard? Was there somebody who encouraged her, aided her, assisted her, who pushed her to pull the trigger? And so our case focused on proving the relationship between Tracy Tarleton and Celeste Beard.
Her testimony came across as very believable because she did not minimize her involvement in it. And she acknowledged right up front that she had committed this murder, that she had done this thing that was wrong, and that she deserved to be punished for it.
She also has some surprising backup.
Both daughters, Jennifer and Christina, testified against their mother.
They really corroborated some things that even Tracy had said, and so it helped to bolster Tracy's testimony.
They understood and witnessed that this was a actual romantic relationship. One of them saw them in bed together. One of them saw them kissing on at least a couple of occasions.
Her daughter's testimony is a cruel blow for Celeste.
He was our dad. We loved him. And he took him away from us.
Celeste was crushed that they turned against her. Just for Celeste to sit in the courtroom with her daughter on the witness stand talking about things that would hurt Celeste, it destroyed her.
But when it's the defense's turn, they claim that Celeste's daughters had their own motive to betray their mother.
The daughters did this thinking that they would get more of Stephen's inheritance.
I think the defense tried to also kind of paint them as, you know, angry teenagers striking out against their mother.
Tracy knew that the defense's whole case also depended on attacking her. And so their strategy was to attack her as mentally ill and delusional and predatory.
We believe that the evidence will show you Tracy Tarleton is not worthy of belief. Tracy was delusional. The delusion was that she and Celeste were lovers. Celeste denied it. Celeste had resisted her advances.
The defense tried to kind of paint her as some mentally unbalanced person who had this affection that was not returned, and that she was acting clearly on her own.
Will it be enough to convince the jury that Celeste is innocent?
The jury was out several days. I was very hopeful. The longer a jury deliberates, the more you know that there are members of the jury that have a different view from the prosecution.
Finally, after nearly 3 days of deliberation, the jury makes its decision.
The jury came back with a guilty on capital murder.
I remember her being pretty emotional. She really had thought she was going to get away with it.
Instead of enjoying Stephen's millions, Celeste will most likely spend the rest of her life in prison.
Capital murder is automatic life sentence.
So she has an eligibility for parole, but it's, you know, like another 20 plus years from now.
In exchange for her testimony, Tracy receives a 20-year sentence with the possibility of parole in 10 years.
Steve's family was involved in the decision to offer Tracy a deal. They felt like Tracy is not a person who would have done this on her own.
You have a gentle soul who's pushed to this crazy act of murder. And she causes this death that she's going to have wear on her soul for the rest of her life.
After the trial was over, the family requested to meet with Tracy and expressed their thanks to her for telling the truth and for making it possible for Celeste to be held accountable for their father's death. Celeste loved money. She loved material things. She loved status. And in the end, that was more important to her than her husband, her children, and the people in her life.